glass windows with Dorothy Day, which is really exciting. I don't know if she'd be happy about that, but other people are very happy. The center middle one is an image from Kelly Latimore, and Kelly Latimore does a lot of really interesting paintings of holy people, holy men, holy women, including people like Dorothy Day, and even Kelly Latimore even has like Fred Rogers as a saint. It's really very interesting. So I like these images myself because she's got like the cigarette, and Dorothy Day used to be able to like drink people under the table, you know, before she opened the Catholic Workers. She was a journalist and was out protesting and things like that. There's a documentary, it's like an hour-long documentary called Dorothy Day, Don't Call Me a Saint. And that's the poster for that documentary. And I really love that kind of, I love that kind of image. You know, there's differences of opinion about the sainthood process, in part because it costs a lot of money, the formal process, and it's a lot of time. And Dorothy herself said, don't call me a saint. So some folks who say maybe we shouldn't be going through the process, they say, look, Dorothy didn't want to be called a saint. And then other people say, yeah, but that's also like a reason for her to be a saint, because that's what a saint would say. Like a saint wouldn't say, yeah, I should be a saint. And here's the documentation I prepared. I've got this list of all these wonderful, awesome things I did. So, one of our favorite images is from 1975. This was the last time Dorothy Day got arrested. And she was speaking to a group in California, and it was around the time when Cesar Chavez was organizing the farm workers, the United Farm Workers, the UFW. And at the time, the state of California was really limiting the ability for farm workers to form labor unions, and also had a separate minimum wage for farm workers. 2 years ago, New York State was the last state in the country to finally allow farm workers to form labor unions, to have collective bargaining. And that was just like 2 years ago. I mean, it's really a terrible injustice. You know, farm workers in New York State did not have the right for a day of rest, which I think I read somewhere in Genesis that I think somebody worked 6 days and got a day off. I read somewhere, I don't know. And then in Exodus, I think that person who took that day off told everyone you should keep that holy day off, you know, a week and not work, all that stuff. So, but this is a great image, in part because there's a popular poster some of you may have seen. It's the same photo of Dorothy being arrested. And it says, our problems stem from our acceptance of this filthy, rotten system. And part of what I love about this image is that Dorothy's sitting on this very small folding chair. There's all these protesters using nonviolence very creatively. And the police are brought in, you know, the farm owners hired private security, and then they also made a lot of contributions to the local police. So the police show up, and they're about to arrest Dorothy. And you see how she's framed on either side by the hips of the police officers, and how there's a gun in a holster on the left side, and then the police officer on the right side has a billy club in their waist. And I love that photo because I love to ask the question, who has the power in this image? So here's this 78-year-old woman, and she's you know, being approached by the police for this. So it's just, anyway, it's very striking. I really am smitten by that image. This is a local image of Dorothy Day. So, and again, you see, she's not found to be smiling a whole lot. So this is an image that's in our house that our kids, when they were younger, called the Scary Dorothy. And if we were having like a festive gathering, the kids would always like take it down and hide it, like put it behind a couch or something. Because it is a very terrifying image of Dorothy. But there's a lovely story behind it, and I'll share this, and then I'll kind of turn things over to my better half. So many of you may know Mary Jane Smith, who started Unity House. And Mary Jane Smith had been a sister of St. Joseph for years, and she got permission to start a Dorothy Day House, a Catholic worker house in Troy, years ago. It was herself, it was a diocesan priest, and then a Franciscan priest. And the three of them opened this house. They called it Dorothy Day House. And the Franciscan priest was an artist, and actually he painted this image. And it's a very large, I mean, it's bigger than this screen. And they hung it like on top of the mantle in the Dorothy Day House. And they were serving people in Troy who were low income, some people who needed housing, people who needed groceries. And they just did this as this experimental sort of way of sort of living out their Christian ministry. Eventually, the needs were so great that they ended up expanding, and then that eventually led to what became what we have today of Unity House. But the initial vision that Mary Jane Smith had for this was that this would be a Catholic worker ministry, a Catholic worker model. And so when the house sort of became more institutionalized and kind of, to offer more services, and Unity does great work, Mary Jane took that painting with her because it meant a great deal to us. And then when we opened the house, especially when we moved to the south end on Trinity Place, Mary Jane Smith presented it to us as sort of like a nice continuity of the Dorothy Day ministry in our capital region. So there's lots of wonderful images of Dorothy Day. And so even though Diane and I never met Dorothy, we really love having the opportunity to sort of carry out that ministry and that mission. So I'm going to turn away and pass things on to my better half to talk about some work we do.
So when we, I don't know, I'm not sure how much you can hear me without the mic. This year's actually our 25th anniversary of opening the house.
Congratulations, Diana.
Yay us, and yay to all the folks who supported us to get us this far. But before we opened the house, both of us were very active in different ministries. Fred was teaching and at Catholic High, and I worked at Catholic Charities while we lived in Syracuse, and then St. John St. Anne's in the South End when we moved here. And we adored our ministries, we adored the people that supported us, we adored the people we ministered to, but had always felt this calling to open the house, open a Catholic worker house. And as Fred was sharing that, he learned more about that when we were in college, pre-work and such. And I learned more about it when I did a year of service with the Dominicans out in Chicago. And when we opened the house, it was quite a change. And in the sense that the Catholic worker model is such that if you want to open a Catholic worker house, you just open a Catholic worker house. You just say, hey, we're opening it. There's no forms to fill out. There's no headquarters to contact. So that's what we did. We just told everyone, here's the house. I think my mother made us a sign, and there it was. There was our house. And just went out and told people, saying, here, we have this house, we have these rooms, folks can come and stay with us. And so they did. Our first guests were a couple that had moved to the area, I forgot even why, from Mississippi. And the challenge was that they did not have a place to stay, but the housing arrangements for the setups for housing for couples were non-existent. I mean, so if they wanted they did need housing, and there was no place that they could go because they didn't have children either. So they came and stayed with us. And the awesome thing is that we could support them while they were with us. I remember through donations, we got them money for gas so that they could go out and search for jobs. And hope you want to get me this. Fred is the teacher of our relationship. He is blessed with the ability to speak extemporaneously. I'm not the teacher, so I get lost.
Do you want to share with them the family we've been friends with since we started, and their two sons?
Sure. So in addition to having rooms in our house for people to stay with us, we also have a lot of families that we support out who've never lived with us in the house and support in various ways through food, school supplies, Christmas gifts, Thanksgiving meals, and just emotional support. There's a particular family that we met almost at the beginning. We've known them for probably 24 years now. And it's a very special relationship in that they have two sons who happen to be just on the either side of one's like a little bit 6 months older, one's 6 months younger than our son, who's our firstborn child. And so for the past 24 years, we've been in really close contact and often conversational about parenting, and especially parenting, or given the fact that their ages they're so close in age. And we're very grateful to a parishioner here, Marge Adio, who was introduced to them, who had been very, very, very close to them and very, very supportive of them. The challenge of their lives is a lack of education and poverty in such that you want to help me with that.
Sure, yeah.
Well, so, a lot of the families that we become friends with and support and advocate with, a lot of them the parents themselves were born poor, and then the children they have are born into poverty. And I guess one approach that we have as Catholic workers is that we're not here to presuming that we're solving anything, and I think there's certain helping professions where it's presumed on return on investment and results and and success stories. People say, give us a success story. And I think for a lot of our relationships with families is that a lot of these families, their lives kind of suck. They're living in poverty and their lives kind of suck. And their lives continue to suck knowing us, but maybe it sucks a little less. So I know maybe that's not very polite language, the second side of a church building, but I guess maybe that's something that we take into account, that we hope that their lives suck slightly less because of our prayers and our support and our friendship and walking with them on the journey. The two sons that this couple have, they're both in state prison, and they've lived their whole lives in the West Hill neighborhood. They've moved over the past 24 years. They've probably moved 12 times, and probably more, and always within West Hill. And we've really tried to help them in a variety of ways. Marge Adio has been awesome, and there's a lot of great things that they enjoy as a family in terms of their closeness with each other, but their lives are also very challenging. And we recognize, just for ourselves as people who are white, people who are college educated, people who grew up in middle class families, that that there are just certain gaps that we can't cross, that we'll try to cross, but we just recognize there are those distinctions there. That our son that was, the same age as them is right now in law school taking a criminal law course while these two young men are in a state prison. And it's just, there are some joys and some celebrations with this ministry, but there's also a certain heaviness to it because there's just these kind of structural challenges that are in the way. And certainly COVID doesn't help things at all. It doesn't help things at all. And I think a big part of this is like this ministry of presence. One of the things Diana's really wonderful at is, especially for a lot of the women we help, is to sort of be there with them, especially for moms, in terms of having that shared experience of being a mom and being present with each other to kind of share the concerns and the joys and the worries of what it means to be a parent these days. And another thing Diana really is excellent at is helping a lot of our families navigate the healthcare system. Because a lot of families we help are immigrant families. English is not their primary language. And many of us for whom English is our first language, we know ourselves how bureaucratic and confusing a healthcare visit can be. Like you're sitting in the waiting room for an hour and 10 minutes, and then the FaceTime you have with your physician might be 45 seconds, and then they leave and you're not sure, are they coming back? What's the next step? What's going on? Do I have a diagnosis? What's the treatment plan? And it can just be over like that. And so Diana's someone who advocates, who does translation and just support and just kind of make sure everybody's in the know. Which sometimes goes very easily and other times makes Diana a little bit of a gadfly to healthcare professionals who just want to kind of shut the folder and get on to the next patient to make good choices, that sort of thing. And I think part of this idea of like these systems that are in place that are obstacles to us, whether it's economic systems, whether it's housing systems, whether it's healthcare systems or education, etc. This is something that Dorothy Day really challenged us to kind of think differently about. And she challenged not only politicians and business people, but she also challenged church leaders. So just to share a couple of stories about Dorothy, in 1949, the people who worked in New York City at the cemeteries, the grave diggers, they felt that they were not getting paid a living wage from the archdiocese. And the grave diggers also really wanted to be able to spend more time with their families. And so they wanted, get ready for this, a day of rest, 1 day off each week. It didn't have to be Sunday, it could be different days of the week. They could rotate it around so they could still do their work. They negotiated with the archdiocese on this, and the archdiocese would not raise their wage to a living wage and would not give them a day of rest. So the grave diggers ended up talking among themselves, and they got in touch with a local union, the CIO of the AFL-CIO, and the CIO leadership started trying to negotiate with the Chancery, and they weren't successful. And then the grave diggers, they did everything they could, so they said, well, we're going to have to go on strike. We don't want to, but we're going to have to go on strike. And so the grave diggers, the Archdiocesan Catholic grave diggers actually went on strike. And what did Francis Spellman, the Cardinal of the Archdiocese of New York, do? He sent buses to the Roman Catholic seminary. He canceled the classes at the seminary and had the seminarians show up in buses and had the seminarians break through the picket line and had the seminarians digging ditches. Now, some of us may be happy at the idea of seminarians doing some hard work, but this was something that was just very, very challenging, and Dorothy was just so upset by this, and she was just trying to figure this all out. And the Cardinal called the grave diggers communist and anti-Christian. And Dorothy, meanwhile, was like publishing articles in the Catholic Worker and speaking publicly to say, you know, if you look at the 1891 papal encyclical Rerum Novarum, and I know we all carry that in our back pocket, but in Rerum Novarum from 1891, the Roman Catholic social teaching officially declared that all workers have the right to labor associations. That is, to have the right to form a labor union or the worker union. And here was the cardinal calling this effort to unionize a communist and anti-Christian, and it was of the devil. And Dorothy was just heartbroken. So the Catholic workers were preparing extra meals. They had soup and sandwiches they were bringing up to the picket lines for the grave diggers. And it was just a really difficult and challenging time. And one of the things Dorothy did was she tried to really cajole the cardinal into to really meeting the grave diggers where they're coming at. And she's written some very lovely letters to the cardinal with some strong language. Anyway, it was a very interesting time where she really took this stand against official church leadership. Another time, just to share, in 1951.
And just want to add, like, Dorothy took no pleasure from this antagonistic relationship with the cardinal. Dorothy was a convert and was very, very committed to her faith and to the hierarchy and to their presence on earth as God's messengers. So the fact that she was in this conflict with the cardinal really, as Fred was saying, really broke her heart.
That's an important point. I mean, Dorothy, she's a strange amalgam of like a traditional Roman Catholic piety, traditional spirituality, and a view of, let's say, social economic teachings that we would maybe label as being very progressive. And so it's this kind of interesting mix. I mean, when Dorothy traveled around to give talks to colleges and parishes, it was said that she always traveled with two things. One was she always traveled with some coffee grounds, so she could always make hot coffee.
A jar of instant coffee.
Jar of instant coffee, and also a breviary, so she could trade the liturgy of the hours wherever she was. So those are like two things she carried with her. And so, as Diana said, I mean, she really did not enjoy that part. I mean, I know sometimes when we're antagonistic with the powers that be, there can be that adrenaline rush, and she did not feel that rush. She really squirmed at that. Another time that this happened was in 1951. She had been taking so many positions because she was committed to workers' rights, workers being able to unionize. She was also committed to nonviolence, and so she that was a very challenging position to take because during World War II, for example, when the U.S. got involved in that war, she maintained her nonviolence position. And as a result, about 3/4 of the Catholic worker houses ended up closing down because people did not support that emotionally or financially or prayerfully anymore. And so it was a very challenging time for her with that. And in 1951, she was asked by the Archdiocese of New York, by the Chancery, to remove the word Catholic from their organizational name, the Catholic Worker. And so they got this letter from the Chancery about this. And the other people in the Catholic Worker House in New York City, they kind of went ballistic. They're like, there's no way in hell we're going to drop the word Catholic, blah, 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 blah. And Dorothy was just like, well, just so they're like, we should go protest. We should have a sit-in at the Chancery office, and we should find where Cardinal Spellman's going to be and protest. And she didn't want to do that. So instead, she wrote this letter. That's it's a really beautiful letter. There's actually a great collection of letters called "All the Way to Heaven: The Selected Letters of Dorothy Day." And in this, one of the letters she has is to the Chancery about basically, thanks for inviting us to drop the word Catholic, but we'll decline on that. So she, and she's very apologetic about, she says, first of all, I wish to assure you of our love and respectful obedience to the church, capital C church, and our gratitude to this archdiocese, which has so often and so generously defended us from many who attacked us. And then it goes on. And then what she says is, she mentions that the Catholic War Veterans, which is an organization, is not an official Roman Catholic group, but they use the word Catholic. And so she said, the Catholic worker is a lot like that. Like, we're not an arm of the Catholic Church institutionally, just like the Catholic War Veterans. And since they get to use the word Catholic, we see it fit and proper for us to continue to use the word Catholic as well. And then she says, again, I repeat, our tone at the Catholic Worker may often be wrong, our writing may be obscure, our ideas may be incomplete, and our errors are bound to crop in. But with the proper attitude, these things can be overcome. But I must not write at any further length. We trust that you understand our desire for obedience, and we are confident that you will consider carefully and in the spirit of charity our aims and positions on the development of the Christian social order. Sincerely in Christ, Dorothy. So here's like this rejection letter she's writing, but she writes it in such a way that it comes across like she's giving in to them, but she's not. She's saying like, no, we're not going to. And I just think she's someone who is just a very strong figure, and I think a great witness for us, because she questions the authority of the time, not just the secular political economic authority, but also the religious authority as well. And I think that's a great witness for us as Roman Catholics, because there are times that our Roman Catholic leaders do things and say things that make us proud and fill us with joy on this joyful third Sunday of Advent. And there are also times when our Roman Catholic leadership say things and do things that make us squirm and bristle and embarrassed. And I think Dorothy is a witness for one way of how we can kind of proceed with like integrating our faith to really advocate for dignity for all people. So I think one thing I'd like to share with you too about our ministry, if it's okay, is we had a family. I just wanted to share, especially because it's in December. We had a family that lived with us. They were an immigrant family. It's very interesting. They were stateless. They used to live in part of the Soviet Union, but not Russia. But they were ethnically Russian, but in another country, Latvia. And after Soviet Union dissolved and all these states, these territories became independent nations, in Latvia they didn't really want a lot of ethnic Russians sticking around. They said, you got to go back to Russia. But Russia couldn't handle everyone coming back from these former Soviet republics. So they said, no room at the inn, which I guess we've heard that line before too. So Latvia wouldn't have them, Russia wouldn't have them, and they had nowhere else to go. They ended up coming to the United States, where they got kicked out. So then they went to Canada, and then they got kicked out of Canada, and then came back to the U.S. And they were just like pinball just bouncing around. They ended up staying with us. They moved in with us. It was a mom and dad and a teenage daughter. I think how old was she when she moved in? About 14?
Like 14, 15.
14 and 15. And it was very nice. Bishop McGinn High School, they let her go to school for free, like no tuition cost at all, which was great. And then when the parents ended up getting jobs, they paid what they could. Very lovely family, very sharp. They're very smart folks and very skilled. And so anyway, we would have dinner together every day, like Monday through Friday. We lived together in the house, and they actually lived with us for over a year. I think it was about 15 months. They lived with us. Part of the challenge was we couldn't get them any sort of official immigration status because, again, they were stateless. And it was just a real mess, and it took that long before they got permission or authorization to work. So if you can't work legally, and then if you get a job off the books and you get caught, that's going to hurt your immigration case. So it's just they were in a just tough bind. So the family was living with us. They'd been with us for about a month or so. Had asked us if we had like a handbag, like a leather handbag, like a purse. And we said, well, we can ask around. That was before internet and email. So we were like, we called, we leave messages, outgoing messages. If anybody has a handbag, can you drop it off? So somebody dropped off, they rang the bell, they dropped it off. And the mom saw it, she goes, oh, is that a handbag for me? But I looked at it, it was all wrinkly, it was creased, there were holes in it, and the strap was broken off in one spot. I said, no, this isn't for you. And she goes, no, but look, it's a handbag. I said, yeah, but look, I said, it's in terrible condition. I'm sure we'll get a much better handbag. She goes, no, that's nice, that's nice. I said, no, really? And she goes, no, really, Fred, I insist. I was like, okay. So I gave it to her. And then about a month later, the family said, there was like a Russian food store that had opened up on North Allen at the time. And they said, we'd love to have like a traditional Russian dessert with you and Diana and with our son Freddie, who was a little one. He was just like 1 or 2 years old. So we said sure. So after dinner, we had this like dessert. They made tea, and they had this lovely Russian dessert. And they said, we have a gift for you. And we said, oh, you don't have to give us a gift. They said, no, we want to give you a gift. So here's the gift. It's this lovely icon, and it's actually an icon of Saint Nicholas, and who's, as we know, is known for being a giver of gifts, a bringer of gifts. And just this past week was the feast of Saint Nicholas, December 6th. So I hope some of you got candy in your shoes. Diane and I got ice cream. We got ice cream in our shoes, but it was in the container. It was still frozen, so it worked out very well. But we got this very lovely, so we thanked them very much. Well, it ends up the mom is an artist, and she actually created, she wrote this icon of St. Nicholas. And because she didn't have all of her materials with her from being displaced from place to place, what she did was she cut out a rectangular piece from that leather handbag to serve as the canvas. And she painted the image of St. Nicholas on the icon using that piece from the leather handbag. And that's why she was asking for this purse. And the husband, the father of the family, was very good at carpentry. He found some wood and he created the frame that's on that holds the icon in place. And it's just it's a very lovely image, and it's a very beautiful gesture from this family. And before we sort of close things up and just open it up for conversation and questions is, I think one of the lessons I got from this, besides the beauty of having this artwork, is that when that kind of really worn out handbag was being donated with the broken strap and with the holes in it, I saw it as trash. I was like, we're just going to get rid of this. This is not worthy of our guests. And yet our guest, saw this image in there, of really being able to find some divine beauty, the sacredness within there. And I think that's part of the joy, I think, of what Dorothy Day offers us, is to find the divine in those aspects of our life that maybe we want to get rid of or toss away or distance ourselves from, but that the divine is still part of that, So anyway, I think with that, we'll stop talking because we've been talking, or I've been talking a lot. So, and just kind of open it up for some conversation, if that's okay. And then we'll close it with some words from Dorothy Day. But let's open it up for some conversation. Hi, Diane.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. I'm remembering that you folks have a garden lot behind you. Does that still exist?
Does that still exist?
How does that fit into your ministry?
That's a good question. Oh, I was going to just show you some it looks like we're... Was it back? Who are those people?
We don't know if it's Ellen's family.
Oh, it's Ellen's family. Here they are working in our garden. No, not really. Sorry, Ellen's family. Well, I think maybe let me see. We broke the internet. Okay, I'm sorry. Part of the slides, we actually had some slides that include the garden, so I apologize about that. Yeah, we've got this wonderful lot that you helped us to get. Thank you very much to help with our closing of the property that we bought from St. John Church of God in Christ. So we've got a beautiful garden there. Dick Shirey, who's a member of your congregation, is an Ignatian volunteer with us at Emmaus House, and so he's down in the garden. We've got all these raised beds. We have a great partnership with Roxbury Farm, and I know many of you are members of the Roxbury Farm CSA down in the Kinderhook area. And so I keep thinking it's going to show up, but it's not going to show up. So that's okay. But yeah, we've got a really beautiful garden, and Diana and Dick will go down to the farm to sow seeds, and then we get these trays of seedlings. We plant them in our Emmaus House gardens in the south end, and then other seedlings get distributed to other community gardens in the low-income areas of Albany and South End, West Hill, and Arbor Hill neighborhoods. It's really awesome, and then we also have some like raised beds right along the sidewalk. So a few years ago, Diana started planting okra, and there's a number of people in the South End who moved here from Mississippi, especially from Shibuda, Mississippi, the small town. And they relocated, and okra is more common down there. And it's always great to see people walking down the sidewalk, and then they see these like okra plants, which look very, very different. You know, they're kind of these stalky palm tree-likes, and they got this beautiful yellow blossom. And people are starting, they got these pods, you know, for the okra, and they love seeing that. We've got raspberry bushes that climb out onto the sidewalk. You know, there's kids in our neighborhood who say they call it sweeter than candy, or raspberry candy, they call it because it's so sweet. And we're very, very fortunate to have all these great veggies, you know. And we've, the one plant that we grow that's really the most popular is collard greens. And we grow those, and they're very hardy, so, you know, we had them growing through like mid-November up until just about Thanksgiving or so, still being very hardy. So we really appreciate Dick's work and all the other people who volunteer with us with the garden and then distribute that. You know, it's great to kind of harvest all that, put a table out in front of the house, and then see that all going away. Part of what Dorothy Day was trying to do was this idea of the Catholic worker was to have a house of hospitality, have some sort of farming commune, and then do these like roundtable discussions where you get together and talk about different issues. So this is like our roundtable discussion in a rectangular format, but that's okay. The farming commune stuff is pretty tough. So when Dorothy bought the original Catholic worker farm was in Easton, Pennsylvania, and then they realized nobody knew how to farm. So they had all these people from New York City that were homeless, that were staying at the Catholic work, and they took a bus to go out to this farm, and the only one who knew how to farm was Peter Morin, who's the wonderful partner of Dorothy Day in terms of starting the Catholic worker. But Peter was a farmer, but he also didn't like to tell people what to do. So he wouldn't tell anyone what to do. And the other Catholic workers said, Peter, please teach us. He's like, no, I don't look. Everyone should just do things for themselves. I shouldn't lord it over you. I shouldn't use my authority. We're all equals here. So as a result, there's actually a strike at the Catholic worker farm by the city Catholic workers who did not know how to farm, and they were striking until Peter Morin taught them how to farm, which is a whole other story. But anyway, but that's the garden. So we haven't had any strikes going on this past summer. Yes, thank you. Yes?
I'm interested. She apparently was not engaged in any of this when she was young, and she had a conversion. I was wondering if you'd tell us just a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah, so her conversion, yeah, I mean, she had this kind of wild life. I mean, she was very politically radical. She identified as an anarchist and sometimes as a communist or as a socialist. She belonged to the IWW, the Industrial Workers of the World. The IWW was the first labor union that had both women and men, and also had people of color in full membership, just to share with you. So that was like the radical notion of the IWW. So she had all that going on, and then early in her life she was pregnant. She had a relationship with another journalist, And he had said, well, if you have this abortion, and he was going overseas, he said, well, if you have this abortion, when I come back, then we'll get married and blah, blah, blah. So she had the abortion, and this is all before the Catholic worker, and the abortion did not go well. There was a lot of hemorrhaging, and then she was also told that she would not be able to have kids again. And then this journalist returned, and
This is in the teens, like 19.
yeah, 19 teens, yes. And the relationship ended. This guy broke up with her. And she was just devastated by the loss of like not being able to become a mother, and also the loss of this relationship. And she felt kind of angry and foolish for this. So there's all these mixed feelings. And then in the midst of all that, she had this common law relationship with this guy named Forster Batterhand. And Forster was an atheist and an anarchist. He was a biologist. And they lived together like in Staten Island. And she ended up becoming pregnant. Again. And she was just shocked that she was pregnant. And she used to see a group of nuns on Staten Island running like a soup kitchen. And she would see all these people, immigrants, coming to the U.S., getting off the boats, and then going into these churches where the immigrants themselves were living in poverty, but the priests of these churches were living very extravagant lives. They had things going very, very well back then. And Dorothy was just so confused. She's like, how is it that you can have people, like, why is it that people are supporting this? And she was just very perplexed by this. But during the same time, when she was early in her pregnancy, she felt this kind of like these kind of spiritual feelings. I mean, it's hard to describe. I mean, she writes about this a little bit, and it's also, left open-ended. But she really felt that there was something else going on here. That here, she wrote somewhere. She goes, "Here I was, a barren woman, the joyful mother." Like she really could, and she really identifies with this season of Advent, this idea of being pregnant and anticipating and waiting. Because again, even though she was pregnant, she wasn't sure if she was going to be able to carry to term and become a parent. This was all up in the air. So that she had one child, her daughter Tamar. Tamar's best friend is a former parishioner here, Mabel Egan Gill. Mabel, who used to live just a few blocks away, and her husband Joe Gill, who served here as a deacon. And Mabel and Tamar spoke every day with each other. With that, her conversion experience, as it were, which was your question, was like, it's tied in with her becoming pregnant and becoming a mom. It was really tied in with that. And she was, she was always struck by the Psalms and certain readings from Scripture, but it really deepened her kind of connection with the divine. And she felt a certain affinity for the divine. And so what happened was, she got to know these nuns more and more as she's pregnant, and she's kind of processing her feelings. And then she decides when her child is born, she wants the child baptized. So she tells Forster this. And Forster's like, Dorothy, are you nuts? Like, we don't believe in God. We're atheists. Like, and now all of a sudden you believe in God? Like, this is just, and there was a lot of tension in that relationship. And it got, I don't mean to diminish it, but it got to the point where Forster more or less said, look, I can't be with you and our child if you're doing this religion thing. And it was kind of like it's either me or this Jesus fellow. And Dorothy chose the Jesus fellow. And now Forster stayed involved in terms of being supportive of Tamar in different ways. But part of Dorothy's embrace of Catholicism and Christianity meant losing another, intimate romantic relationship with someone else. So that's all like tied in together. I hope I explained that well. Maybe that's too much detail. I don't know. Here we go. My apologies. Does anyone else have a question or comment?
I have a comment.
Yes, and then the person with the vest. Yes, thank you. Yes.
It shows how old I am. I actually met Dorothy Day, and I was a teenager, and I had heard about the Catholic Worker Hospitality House. I grew up in New York City, so I went to Skid Row, and there was this white-haired lady who was sitting in the kitchen peeling potatoes. And they said, that's Dorothy Day.
Mm.
And I thought that was perfect, you know, after learning more about her, et cetera. That seemed like that was perfect. She looked like a curmudgeon then, by the way.
Yeah, she was great at deferring people. Like, she would be talking to someone who was homeless and maybe their mental health didn't have a lot of stability. Dorothy would be talking to this person, and meanwhile a journalist would show up and would be waiting. And then Dorothy would turn and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, you're waiting to talk to my friend."
Right.
And then she'd get, you know, and the implication is like that, you know, it's not as if everyone's coming for her. So,
Right.
yeah, thank you for sharing that, Dahlia. Yes?
Well, you mentioned healthcare for people, and I just think it's, what's the word, a good synchronicity or whatever that you're on Trinity Place, because I volunteer at the City Mission Clinic. There is a free clinic down there, and I don't know if you take advantage of that or not. It's the big deal is it's for people without health insurance, and I suspect many of your people don't have health insurance in spite of universal health care. But it's open Tuesdays and Fridays. It's open from 9 in the morning till 3. It's volunteer doctors. They have a limited pharmacy. They'll fill prescriptions. And, you know, I would just recommend that you take advantage of that. And if other people don't know that, it's a wonderful service that the City Mission provides. And I'm happy to volunteer just as a slug at the computer entering data. But it's a great resource, and it's right up the street from you. So
Great, thank you. Thank you very much for sharing that. Yeah, the Rescue Mission does offers a lot of great services. And, you know, and some of our guests, you know, access some of those. So thank you for sharing that. And certainly things have changed over time in terms of access to health care. But it still continues to be a bit of an obstacle for some folks, right? But thank you for sharing. I'm going to read the postscript from Dorothy Day's The Long Loneliness. So that's her autobiography. And just to share with you, there's on the side table there's some Catholic worker books and Dorothy Day books. So if you'd like any of those, feel free to take them with you. There's a little bowl if you wanted to contribute some money for the books. There's no prices on them, I don't think, but whatever you want to do. And so there's some stuff there about Dorothy Day and some other Catholics for social justice, just to share that with you. So if you'd like to take any of that, go for it. And with that, I think we'll close, if that's all right. I'm just trying to be mindful of time, especially with the 11 o'clock show you have, I think. So you already have the matinee. So here we go. And this is just a very lovely passage, how Dorothy Day ends her autobiography, The Long Loneliness.
We were just sitting there talking when Peter Boehrer came in. We were just sitting there talking when lines of people began to form, saying, "We need bread." We could not say, "Go, be thou filled." If there were 6 small loaves and a few fishes, we had to divide them. There was always bread. We were just sitting there talking, and people moved in on us. Let those who can take it, take it. Some moved out, and that made room for more. And somehow, the walls expanded. We were just sitting there talking, and someone said, "Let's all go live on a farm." It was as casual as all that, I often think. It just came about. It just happened. I found myself a barren woman, the joyful mother of children. It's not easy always to be joyful, to keep in mind the duty of delight. The most significant thing about the Catholic worker is poverty, some say. The most significant thing is community, others say. We are not alone anymore. But the final word is love. At times it has been, in the words of Father Zosima, a harsh and dreadful thing. And our very faith in love has been tried through fire. We cannot love God unless we love each other. And to love, we must know each other. We know Him in the breaking of bread, and we know each other in the breaking of bread. And we are not alone anymore. Heaven is a banquet, and life is a banquet, too, even with a crust, where there is companionship. We have all known the long loneliness, and we have learned that the only solution is love, and that love comes with community. It all happened while we were sitting there talking, and it's still going on.
Thanks again for having us. We really appreciate Dave Rowell for organizing all this, so thank you, Dave. And we're appreciative to Elizabeth Simcoe, your awesome Parish Life Director.